This is the brand new COROS VERTIX 2S, and no, the S does not stand for small. Welcome back, I'm Dave from Chase the Summit, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive on the new COROS VERTIX 2S. And not only do I have one of these watches, I've actually got 3 of these watches and all of the new color options, and we'll be taking a closer look at that in a minute. So what is the new COROS VERTIX 2S? Well, as the name implies, it's basically just an incremental update to the original COROS VERTIX 2 that came out way back in 2021. Even though the original VERTIX 2 is still a very capable watch, even after a couple of years, it's got great battery life and tons of features, it has fallen behind a little bit in terms of technology when it comes to the GPS antenna and the accuracy and the heart rate sensor and all of that, because over the past couple of years, COROS has developed new versions of all of that technology for their other watches, like the Pace 3 or the Apex 2, for example. And that's where the new VERTIX 2S comes in, because it's basically the same watch as the VERTIX 2. It looks very similar in terms of design, but it has some new technology in it that brings it up to modern day standards. And before we move on, I do want to give you a quick disclaimer. I've only had the new VERTIX 2S for a few days now, and I've only had the chance to run with it a couple of times. So I'm not going to call this an overly in-depth review or anything like that. This is more of an initial review. However, I do have some data that I do want to share with you in terms of GPS and heart rate accuracy and my overall experience with this watch so far. So stay tuned for that. With all of that out of the way, let's dive into the first topic about the new VERTIX 2S, and that's going to be pricing and color options, because that's where the VERTIX 2S got a big upgrade. If you remember, with the original COROS VERTIX 2, this watch only came in 2 different color options. And that's where things have changed quite a bit on the new VERTIX 2S, because as you can see here, there's now 3 new colors you can choose from. And of course, these colors aren't simply just colors, they have fancy marketing names as well. All the way on the left here, we do have Space, which is all black, of course. In the middle, we have Earth, which is sort of like a navy blue. And then all the way on the right here, we do have Moon, which is sort of a light gray kind of graphite color. And I gotta say, I do really like these colors. In particular, I'm a big fan of this moon color here because it's not really too flashy and it's not like a white watch. It does have this subtle gray appearance to it, and the bezel has this matte finish to it, which looks really nice. The Earth model here is also really nice as well because it is blue, but it's not like super in-your-face royal blue. It's a pretty subtle dark blue that you could wear with just about any outfit. And then of course there is Space Black, and yeah, it's all black, but it's not like super dark black. In fact, the sides here are actually kind of a dark gray, while the bezel is properly black. So it does have a little bit of contrast to it. And I got to assume this is probably going to be the best selling model because everybody likes a black watch. Now that we've talked about the colors, let's talk about the price, because this is a welcome surprise to me at least. The new COROS VERTIX 2S is the same price as the original COROS VERTIX 2. These new watches come in at $699 here in the USA, of course, and the old version was the same exact price. So they didn't increase the price, they just kept it the same, which I do appreciate. However, even though the prices of these watches are the same, what you get for that price is actually quite a bit different. The first thing I want to talk about when you buy these watches is the packaging, because this is a dramatically different experience compared to the original VERTIX 1 and VERTIX 2. Because if you're a VERTIX 1 or VERTIX 2 owner, you probably remember these things. These are the flight cases that were included with the original VERTIX 1 and VERTIX 2. And as you can see, they are total overkill. And if you go back in time and watch my initial review of the VERTIX 1, I say something like, "Is this totally necessary?" Because it costs money and it had to have added to the price, and it was already a very expensive watch, and it was kind of crazy for a box that you're probably never going to use for anything else. And as you can see, this COROS VERTIX 1 flight case is basically like a Pelican super rugged waterproof case with a rubber seal, a plastic lid, and these big heavy-duty latches on the front here. In similar fashion, on the VERTIX 2, this watch got a pretty beefy flight case as well, although not quite on the same level as the VERTIX 1. It's a little bit thinner and lighter weight. Now let's take a look at the new packaging. This is the VERTIX 2S packaging, and as you can see, compared to the original VERTIX 1 and 2, it's quite a bit smaller, and not only that, this thing is now recyclable. Even though this is made out of recycled cardboard material, it's still reusable. In fact, you can see on the front here, there's a little clasp and it's got Velcro there to hold it shut. So if you did want to keep your watch in here, you could do that. On the left here is where your watch would be when you buy it, and then you get your band here, and then over on the right is where your charging cable and paperwork would be. With that said, you do get an added perk to the VERTIX 2S because, like I said, it's the same price as the VERTIX 2, but the packaging is much cheaper, obviously, and it's recyclable. But now when you buy a Vertix 2S, you also get an extra band in the box, which I think is a good trade-off for not getting that flight case. And of course, these bands are all color-coded. On the left, we've got the space black version with the black nylon band. We've got the Earth version here in the middle with the blue navy look on the nylon band. And then we've got the moon version with the moon gray nylon band as well. And I do think all of these bands look really nice with their corresponding watches. The interesting thing about these new nylon bands is they don't have a typical quick release clasp like on the rubber band here. There's no button. So it's really just a little hook mechanism. And you kind of just line it up with the bar on the watch and push down and it pops on. And it will not fall off. And the only way to get it off is to rotate the band 90 degrees like that, push up on it, and then it'll pop off that way. So let's put these bands aside for a minute and talk more about these watches, because as you might have noticed so far, another change with the unboxing experience is the watch face. This is the first time that COROS has done this. So they've included different watch faces depending on which model you buy. For example, here I've got the moon model, and if you look closely, you can see that there's actually a moon animation for a watch face. There's kind of like shooting stars going by. There's a moon in the middle there that's got a slight rotation to it, and it is really cool looking. Jumping over to the Earth model here, you can see there's a picture of the Earth in the background. And again, there is an animation where the Earth is slowly spinning around. And finally, we've got the space black version. And as the name implies, the background is sort of like a spacey black. Not much to it, but there are some stars and like clouds and galaxies and things back there. And I actually think this is my favorite of the bunch. A couple of things I've noticed about these new watch faces though, they have a very limited amount of data fields available. They only have one data field at the bottom here. Of course, you can click the back button and change that data field and cycle through all the other metrics. And the final thing I'll mention about these watch faces is that the time of day is kind of hard to read on the Earth and the moon model, particularly the Earth model, because as you can see, the time of day sort of blends in with the surface of the moon at the bottom of the screen. I don't know why they did that, but that's the way it is. Now that we've talked about the watch faces, that's enough about watch faces. Let's talk about the actual hardware. Again, the new COROS VERTIX 2S is very, very similar to the original COROS VERTIX 2. As you can see, the original kind of looks like another color variant in the lineup here, even though it is a different watch. Taking a closer look here though, there are some slight differences. For example, the bezel on the VERTIX 2 was really shiny, where the bezel on the new 2S is all matte, no matter what color you choose. Flipping them on their sides here, you can see even the button layout is pretty much identical, and the design is pretty much the same. And the overall size and weight is pretty much the same as well. The new VERTIX 2S comes in at 50 millimeters in diameter, and it's about 17.6 millimeters thick, which is slightly thicker than the original VERTIX 2, but holding them side by side here, I can't even tell them apart. And for a quick size comparison, I've got some other watches on the table here, and these are all sort of flagship rugged watches. All the way on the left is the original VERTIX 2. Then we've got the Garmin Epix Pro 51 millimeters. Then we've got the Apple Watch Ultra 2. The new COROS VERTIX 2S here. Then we've got the Polar Grit X2 Pro, which is slightly smaller than all of these other watches. And all the way on the right is the Garmin Fenix 7X Pro. So the VERTIX 2S is a larger watch, but it's not quite as big as something like the Fenix 7X Pro. Now let's talk about durability. The new COROS VERTIX 2S is pretty much the same there as well. It's got a sapphire display, just like the original VERTIX 2. It's got a titanium bezel and backplate, and these things are all built like absolute tanks. They're also waterproof down to 100 meters. Moving right along, let's talk about the display. So as you can see, you've probably noticed already, COROS has opted to continue the trend and use an MIP transflective display on these watches. These watches have a 1.4 inch display in the same 280 by 280 resolution as the original VERTIX 2. And I'm not surprised that COROS did not go with an AMOLED display like you can see here on my Forerunner 965 and continued on with the MIP display, because these displays are more utilitarian, and that's kind of where COROS focuses their efforts. If I scroll through my data fields, you can read the stuff, but I have to sort of angle the watch towards my light source here so I can see it clearly. It's not super vibrant or easy to read in all lighting conditions like you'd get on an AMOLED display, but again, we're getting better battery life here because of the MIP display. With the displays out of the way, let's move into one of the biggest updates on this watch, and that's with GPS accuracy. The new COROS VERTIX 2S has an updated GPS antenna design. I think they're actually using the same chipset as the COROS VERTIX 2, but they've just changed how the antenna kind of goes through the body. And in my testing so far, it's looking pretty promising. So just like on the original COROS VERTIX 2, the new 2S is multi-band enabled. That means it can use multiple frequencies to get a better GPS fix. So I've taken the COROS VERTIX 2S on a couple of different test runs, and in those test runs, in one example, I went to a running track where I just did multiple laps around the track while wearing multiple GPS devices, all in their maximum accuracy settings. And in this test, I did not use track mode because I wanted to see how accurate these watches could be without track mode. And it turns out the VERTIX 2S was one of the top performers in that test. In another example, I went on a couple of out and back runs where I ran straight out on a road run, turned around and ran back on the same path. In an ideal world, that would mean the tracks would be stacked right on top of each other when I'm analyzing them after the fact. And as you can see here, again, the COROS VERTIX 2S was one of the top performers here as well. Generally speaking, I'd say the new antenna design is working and I'm getting pretty solid results from it so far. But like I said, I've only had these watches for a few days and I'll have to test them in a longer term experiment to see how they hold up over time. If things change, I'll get back to you in a future video. With GPS accuracy out of the way, let's talk about the other big improvement on the VERTIX 2S, and that's with the heart rate sensor on the back of the watch. On the right here, we've got the new COROS VERTIX 2S with the new heart rate sensor, and then on the left is the older COROS VERTIX 2. And as you can see, the heart rate sensor looks very different, and that's because they're using their updated heart rate sensor, and this is the same heart rate sensor they've used in the COROS Pace 3 and even their dedicated armband heart rate monitor. If we take a closer look at these heart rate sensors, you can see on the left, on the older heart rate sensor, there are 3 light emitters and 1 photo detector that receives that light. On the new design, there's actually 5 light emitters and 4 photo detectors, which should result in better accuracy. So again, I've only had these watches for a couple of days, but in my testing so far, the heart rate sensor does seem like an improvement over the original VERTIX 2. However, it's not perfect. There are still some blips here and there. There's some spikes and drops, and in some examples, it's not super accurate, but I do think in my limited testing so far, this is still a pretty big step up as compared to the original VERTIX 2. But again, I need to do more testing for a longer term review, so stay tuned for that. I should also mention, for heart rate testing purposes, I also wore the nylon band because these bands generally result in better heart rate accuracy because they're infinitely adjustable as compared to wearing the silicone band. So if you're doing testing at home, consider a nylon band as well. Now that we've talked about that new heart rate sensor, let's talk about the battery life on the VERTIX 2S because they kind of go hand in hand. Unfortunately, because the new heart rate sensor demands more power, the new COROS VERTIX 2S actually gets less battery life compared to the original VERTIX 2, which is kind of surprising, but not that concerning because the VERTIX 2 had crazy battery life. Like, who needs 140 hours in a GPS activity? I don't think I do, but I guess you might. So let's talk battery life. In daily, everyday use and standby mode, just using it as a smartwatch, you'll get about 46 days of battery life out of these watches, which is really good. It's not quite as good as like the Suunto Vertical, for example, but it's right up there with being a top performer. However, that 46 days is with out-of-the-box settings. If you do turn on sleep tracking or stress tracking, for example, that'll bring that number down, but still, it's very good. On the other hand, when you're in an activity like on a run or a bike ride, that's where things have changed quite a bit. Where on the original COROS VERTIX 2, you could get up to 140 hours in a GPS activity in GPS only mode and standard tracking, which is mind-blowing. That's a lot of time in a GPS activity. On the new COROS VERTIX 2S, you'll get about 118 hours with the same accuracy. So you do get less battery life in a GPS activity. It's still a lot of battery life. You could still complete a 100-mile ultra marathon or, a multi-day hike or something like that with these watches, but just know it's just a little bit less than the original VERTIX 2. Okay, now it's time for final thoughts and conclusions in my initial review of the COROS VERTIX 2S. What do I think about it so far? Well, generally speaking, I like the updates they've rolled out to the new 2S. They've basically taken the VERTIX 2 and put it on steroids and brought it up to today's standards, which is great. However, I do wish there was a little bit more to it, like the major updates here are really with the heart rate sensor and GPS accuracy, where on the original version, I didn't have like a ton of complaints about the GPS accuracy, although I didn't have great performance on the heart rate sensor, so it's good to see that they've made that better. But overall, it's kind of the same watch. $699 here in the USA is still a lot of money, and the competition in this price range is kind of tough because you've got watches like the Garmin Epix Pro, the Garmin Epix Gen 2, the Fenix 7 Pro, and on sale you can find them creeping down into that price range, and sometimes even below that. However, even though the Garmin ecosystem and experience is a bit more polished when it comes to things like apps and navigation and things like that, COROS keeps making huge advancements in a lot of these departments in the form of software updates. And they keep rolling out updates to existing devices. Even though they're a couple of years old, like the Vertix 2 here, it still gets new features, and that's great to see, and something I really like about COROS watches. And that's where I'm a bit perplexed on the new Vertix 2S, because I do like this watch, but that price tag is hard to swallow, and I feel like COROS really shines in that lower price category. For example, the COROS Pace 3 at $229 is kind of a no-brainer. It's a great watch for that price point. It's something I recommend all the time. So I guess if you're a hardcore COROS fan and you're looking at the Vertix 2, this is kind of a no-brainer because it's the same price. You get an extra band and better accuracy. But if you're looking at a new watch in this price category from any brand, that's where things get kind of difficult. And now's that point of the video where I want to hear from you. Are you going to buy a new COROS Vertix 2S? Are you going to keep your existing Vertix 2? Are you just going to get an Epix 2 Pro or a Pace 3? Or are you going to buy something entirely different like an Apple Watch or a Garmin or something like that? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. All right, friends, we've made it to the end of this video, and if you're still watching, you probably liked this video, and if you did like this video, please consider going down and giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. And while you're down there, check out all of the links in the description, because I'll have links over to the COROS Vertix 2, the Vertix 2S, the Garmin's I've showed off. Every watch in this video will be linked down below, and those links do help support this channel. They don't cost anything extra to you, but they do help me, so consider using them. And while you're checking out those product links down below, also check out the links over to my other social media accounts, like my podcast, my Instagram, my Threads account, or my website where you can buy an awesome shirt like this one. Rad bod. You like what I did there? Okay, friends, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!